To remove the access panel, slide the access panel latch to the unlocked position. Grasp the handle on the side of the panel and pull slightly to the rear before pulling up on the back of the panel. Remove the panel from the unit. The access panel has several tabs on its side and leading edges, which fit into slots. And over the front lip of the PC. There are also two tabs on the rear inside edge that slide into slots on the rear of the chassis. Note that the rear tabs can get bent easily and make it difficult to replace the panel. Before replacement, make sure the rear tabs are unbent and in a parallel position to the surface of the panel. There is also a small slot on the rear of the panel that a lock slot on the PC slides into. To reattach the panel, align the tabs on the panel over the corresponding slots on the PC. Slide the panel forward until the forward edge of the panel is flush against the main bezel and the access panel latch snaps into place. To remove the optical drive, first remove the access panel. If a 5¼ drive adapter assembly for an additional 3½ drive is installed, remove the main bezel and the 5¼ drive adapter assembly as well. Detach the power and data cables from the rear of the optical drive. Press on the green drive release latch at the rear of the drive and slide the drive out the front of the unit. If you are installing a new optical drive, pull the green drive release latch off of the optical drive. Insert a straightened paper clip or other similar tool into the forced eject hole on the optical drive to eject the drive tray. Pry and push out on the tabs, securing the bezel to the optical drive. And remove the bezel from the drive. The optical drive bezel has several tabs that fit into slots on the front of the optical drive. To install a new optical drive, press the old optical drive bezel onto the optical drive until the tabs are secured. There are two small pins on the green drive release latch that fit into two small holes on the side of the optical drive. Press the pins into their holes to secure the latch to the new optical drive. Slide the drive into its bay through the front of the PC until the green release latch snaps into place. Replace the power and data cables to the rear of the drive. To remove a PS2 and serial port module if present in the unit, first remove the access panel. Lift the latch for the expansion card's retaining bracket and swing the bracket out. Detach the connector for the PS2 and serial port module from the motherboard. Carefully remove the module from the unit. To replace a PS2 and serial port module, align the back slot edge of the adapter into its position at the rear of the unit. Reattach the connector to the motherboard. Rotate the expansion card's retaining bracket back into place to secure the adapter. To replace the system fan, first remove the access panel. Next, detach the fan connector to the motherboard. Remove the 3 Phillips number 2 screws that attach the fan to the rear of the PC. Keep your hand on the fan as you remove the last screw to keep it from falling. Then pull the fan out of the PC. There is a hole on the bottom inside corner of the system fan that aligns over a small post on the rear of the PC. To replace the system fan, align the fan so it is blowing outward. The label on the fan should be facing out of the system. The connector should be aligned toward the bottom of the unit. Align the hole of the fan over its post, and align the screws of the fan with the screw holes at the rear of the PC. Secure the fan to the rear of the PC with its 3 Phillips number 2 screws. Reattach the fan connector to the motherboard. To remove the solenoid lock assembly, first remove the access panel. Disconnect the solenoid lock connector from the motherboard. Detach the 2 Torx 15 security screws that secure the solenoid lock assembly to the rear of the unit. Note, you will need a screw bit with a hollow tip to remove the security screws. Keep your hand on the solenoid lock as you remove the last screw and remove the solenoid lock assembly from the unit. There is a small guide on the rear of the PC that an edge of the solenoid lock rests on. To replace the solenoid lock assembly, place the assembly against the rear inside wall of the chassis, aligning the edge of the lock onto its guide. Replace the 2 Torx 15 security screws to secure the lock to the unit. Reconnect the solenoid lock connector to the motherboard. To remove the hood sensor, first remove the access panel. Disconnect the hood sensor connector from the motherboard. Slide the hood sensor out of its cutout on the rear edge of the PC and remove it from the unit. The top edges of the hood sensor slide over a cutout on the rear of the PC. To replace the hood sensor, slide the hood sensor edges over the cutout until secure. Reattach the hood sensor connector to the motherboard. To remove the main bezel, or dust filter bezel, first remove the access panel. Unlatch the 3 side tabs of the main bezel and rotate the bezel away from the PC. Some units will have a dust filter bezel attached to the main bezel. To replace the main bezel or the dust filter bezel in these units, pry the 2 bezels apart until they separate. If installing a new dust filter bezel, press and snap the dust filter bezel onto the main bezel until all edges on the bezels are flush. The main bezel has 3 hooked tabs on the right side and 3 tabs with cutouts on the left side, which fit over tabs and over alignment posts on the chassis. To replace the main bezel, align the hooked tabs on the right side of the bezel over their tabs, then rotate and press the left side of the bezel until the cutout tabs snap over their posts. To remove the dual 2.5-inch hard drives, if installed in the unit, first remove the access panel. Detach the power and data connectors from the top 2.5-inch hard drive. Pull out on the metal drive release latch for the top hard drive and tip the rear of the hard drive up. Slide the drive toward the center of the cage and pull it out of the cage. If also removing the bottom hard drive, detach the power and data connectors from the bottom 2.5-inch drive. Pull out on the metal drive release latch for the bottom hard drive, tip the edge up, and slide the drive toward the center of the cage to pull it out of the cage. If replacing either drive, remove the 4 Phillips No. 1 shock-mounted screws installed on the sides of the drive and reserve. To install a new 2.5-inch hard drive, attach the 4 reserved Phillips No. 1 guide screws to the sides of the hard drive. The 4 guide screws on each hard drive align into slots on the drive cage. To replace the bottom hard drive, align the forward guide screws of the drive into their slots, then press down on the rear of the hard drive while pulling out on the metal latch. Replace the power and data connectors to the bottom hard drive. Repeat this procedure to replace the top 2.5-inch hard drive. To remove the primary 3.5-inch hard drive if installed in the unit, first remove the access panel. Detach the power and data connectors from the hard drive. Pull out on the metal drive release latch for the hard drive and tip the rear of the hard drive up. Slide the drive toward the center of the cage and pull it out of the cage. If replacing the hard drive, detach the 4 Torx 15 shock-mounted screws on the sides of the hard drive and reserve. To install a new hard drive, attach the 4 reserved Torx 15 guide screws to the sides of the hard drive. The 4 guide screws on the hard drive align into slots on the drive cage. When replacing the hard drive, align the forward guide screws of the drive into their slots with the hard drive spindle side down. Then press down on the rear of the hard drive while pulling out on the metal latch. Replace the power and data connectors to the hard drive. To remove the drive's cage, first remove the access panel. Disconnect the power and data connectors from the 3.5-inch hard drive or the top 2.5-inch hard drive in the cage. Push the hard drive cables down completely toward the motherboard area. Remove the power and data connectors from the 3.5-inch drive in the 5.25-inch drive adapter assembly if an adapter assembly is installed in the unit. Disconnect the power and data connectors from the optical drive if there is not a 5.25-inch drive adapter assembly installed. Lift the inside edge of the cage slightly, slide the cage toward the center of the unit, and tip up the inside edge of the cage. If there is a bottom 2.5-inch hard drive installed, or a 5.25-inch adapter assembly installed in the unit, disconnect the connectors from the 2.5-inch drive, or optical drive, before fully lifting the drive's cage out of the PC. There are 2 pegs on each side of the drive's cage. Let's slide into slots on the chassis. To replace the drive's cage, insert the 2 front side pegs of the cage into their slots. If there is a 5.25-inch drive adapter assembly or a 2.5-inch bottom hard drive installed in the cage, replace the connectors to the optical drive and bottom hard drive. Before you slide the cage forward and swing down the inside edge of the cage. Replace the power and data cables to the optical drive if a 5.25-inch drive is not installed in the unit. Replace the power and data cables to the 3.5-inch drive installed in the 5 1/4-inch drive adapter assembly if installed in the unit. Pull up into the drive cage and replace the power and data cables to the primary 3 1/2-inch or top 2 1/2-inch hard drive in the cage. To remove the 5 1/4-inch to 3 1/2-inch drive adapter assembly if installed in the unit, first remove the access panel and the main bezel. Detach the power and data connectors from the 3 1/2-inch hard drive in the adapter cage. Press on the green drive release latch at the rear of the assembly and slide the 5 1/4 drive adapter assembly out of the unit. If replacing the 3 1/2-inch drive in the cage, pull out on the metal latch at the rear of the drive, tip up the rear of the drive, and remove the drive from the cage. Detach the 4 Torx 15 shock-mounted screws from the hard drive and reserve. To install a new drive into the 5 1/4-inch drive adapter assembly, first attach the 4 reserved Torx 15 shock-mounted screws to the new drive. The screws on the drive align into slots on the adapter cage. To replace the drive in the cage, align the forward screws of the hard drive into their slots, then press the bottom screws down into their slots while pulling out on the metal retaining latch. The 5 1/4 drive adapter assembly has 2 guide screws on each side that fit into guides on its bay inside the PC. To replace the assembly, align the screws to the guides and slide the drive adapter assembly back until its green release latch snaps into place. Replace the power and data connectors to the rear of the 3 1/2-inch hard drive. To replace the DisplayPort module if installed on the motherboard, first remove the access panel and the system fan. Detach the 2 Phillips No. 1 screws securing the module to the motherboard. Pull the module off of the motherboard and out of the unit. There is a connector on the DisplayPort module that fits into a connector on the motherboard. To replace the module, press the connector edge of the DisplayPort module onto the motherboard connector. Secure the DisplayPort module to the motherboard with its 2 Phillips No. 1 screws. To remove the SD card reader if present in the unit, first remove the access panel and the main bezel. It is also helpful to remove the drives cage for better access. Detach the SD card reader connector from the motherboard. Detach the Torx 15 screw securing the SD card reader to the front of the unit. Pull the reader out of the front of the unit. The SD card reader has 2 small holes that fit over alignment pegs at the front of the unit. To replace an SD card reader, feed its connector in through the front of the unit and press the holes on the reader over their pegs. Secure the reader to the front of the unit with its Torx head screw. Reattach the SD card reader connector to the motherboard. To remove the speaker, first remove the access panel and the main bezel. It is also helpful to remove the drives cage. Detach the speaker connector to the motherboard. Remove the two Torx 15 screws at the front of the PC that secure the speaker to the front of the PC. Keep your hand on the speaker as you detach the second screw, and pull the speaker out of the unit. There are two small holes on the speaker that fit over small alignment pegs on the front end side of the PC. To replace the speaker, press the speaker holes over their alignment pegs with the connector aligned toward the motherboard. Replace the two Torx 15 screws at the front of the unit to secure the speaker to the unit. Replace the speaker connector to the motherboard. To remove an expansion card if present in the unit, first remove the access panel and the drives cage. Lift the latch for the expansion card's retaining bracket and swing the bracket out. If removing a graphics card from the PCI x16 slot, detach the serial PS2 module connector from the motherboard if installed in the unit, and the hood sensor cable from the motherboard, and clear them from the card area. Press on the latch for the PCI x16 slot on the motherboard if removing a card from the PCI x16 slot. Carefully pull out the expansion card. To replace an expansion card, carefully align and push the card into its slot on the motherboard until it is fully seated. Replace the hood sensor and serial PS2 module connectors, if installed in the unit, to the motherboard if they were removed to service the graphics card. Rotate the expansion card's retaining bracket back into place to secure the card. To remove the power supply, first remove the access panel, the main bezel, and the drives cage. Detach all power supply connectors to the motherboard. Note that the motherboard connectors have a latch that must be pressed to release the connectors. Snip the two plastic cable ties that secure the power supply connectors to the front metal of the chassis, being careful of the nearby wireless LAN antenna cable. Detach the three Torx 15 screws that connect the power supply to the PC. Press the latch at the inside edge of the power supply in the unit and slide the power supply into the PC before fully removing it from the unit. There is a slot on the side of the power supply that slides over a large tab on the sidewall of the chassis. To replace the power supply, align the power supply slot slightly behind the chassis tab, then slide the power supply back until it locks into place next to the latch. Reattach the three Torx 15 screws at the rear of the chassis. Secure the power connectors to the front of the chassis with two plastic cable ties. Reconnect all power connectors to the motherboard. To replace system memory, first remove the access panel, and the drives cage. Disconnect the nearby power supply connector from the motherboard and clear it away from the memory area. Simultaneously push down on the clips on either side of the DDR4 DIMM socket to release the memory module. Carefully pull out the memory module. There is one notch on the bottom of every DDR4 DIMM module, offset from the center, that fits over a tab in the DDR4 DIMM memory socket. When installing DDR4 DIMMs, align the notch on the module with the tab in the socket. Press the module into the socket until the clips on both sides of the socket lock into place. Replace the nearby power supply connector to the motherboard. Remove the heatsink. First, remove the access panel and the drives cage. Remove the power SATA cables from the screw posts and guides on the heatsink. Detach the heatsink connector to the motherboard. Loosen the 4 captured Torx 15 screws for the heatsink and gently pull the heatsink out of the PC. Before replacing the heatsink into the system, first clean off the old thermal grease from the microprocessor. Clean the grease from the heatsink if you are replacing the same heatsink into the system. Apply new thermal grease or thermal pad to the microprocessor. Align the 4 screws of the heatsink over the 4 screw holes on the motherboard with the connector aligned toward the top of the unit. Tighten the 4 Torx 15 heatsink screws. Replace the heatsink connector to the motherboard. Reroute the power SATA cables into the guides and the inside screw posts of the heatsink. To remove the CPU, first remove the access panel, the drives cage, and the heatsink. Press down to release the CPU load lever from its retention tab, and pull the load lever and load plate away from the socket. Identify pin 1 on the socket by the mark on the corner of the socket stencil. Line up the pin 1 corner of the Intel CPU removal replacement tool over the socket. Press down on the plunger of the removal tool to pick up the CPU from the socket and remove the tool and the CPU from the motherboard. To replace the CPU, first identify pin 1 position on the microprocessor by noting the yellow mark on the corner of the chip assembly. Make sure the Intel CPU staging tool side pins are set to the correct socket type for the CPU. For this unit, it is LGA1151. Place the CPU into the Intel CPU staging tool. When correctly inserted, the small notches on the side of the CPU should align over the side pins on the staging tool. Place the removal replacement tool over the stage, lining up the pin 1 triangles on each tool. Press down on the removal replacement tool to pick the CPU up from the stage. Align the removal replacement tool again to pin 1 on the motherboard CPU socket. Press the plunger on the removal replacement tool to release the CPU into the socket. Swing the load plate down. Lock the load lever under its retaining tab to secure the microprocessor into place. To remove the wireless LAN antennas, first remove the access panel, the main bezel, and the drives cage. Carefully snap off the antennas from the wireless LAN board. Detach the Torx 15 screw for the front antenna and remove the front antenna from the unit. Pull the rear antenna through its access hole to the front side of the unit. Remove the rear antenna cable from the cable guides at the front of the PC. Pull the rear antenna back into the main cavity of the unit through its access hole near the top of the unit. Pull the rear antenna cable out from the small cable tunnel at the top inside of the PC. Remove the rear antenna cable from the cable guide on the inside rear wall of the PC. There is a hooked tab securing the rear antenna cover into place. Squeeze the tab to release the tab side of the cover and pull the cover off the unit. Detach the Torx 15 screw for the rear antenna and pull the antenna out of the rear of the unit. Each antenna has a small hole that fits over a small locator peg on the front or rear of the PC. To replace the rear antenna, feed the rear antenna in through its access hole at the rear of the unit. Align its hole over its peg, and secure the rear antenna with its Torx 15 screw. The rear antenna cover has 2 small tabs on one side and a hooked tab on the other that fit into slots on the rear of the unit. To replace the cover, insert the 2 tabs into their slots, then press the hooked tab into its slot until the cover is securely in place. Replace the rear antenna into the cable guide on the rear inside wall of the PC. Replace the rear antenna cable into the small cable tunnel on the top inside of the PC. Feed the rear antenna cable back to the front of the unit through the hole marked ANT at the top of the unit. Secure the rear antenna into the cable guides on the front of the PC. Feed the rear antenna back into the main cavity of the unit through the bottom hole marked ANT. Feed the front antenna cable in through its access hole and align the hole on the front antenna over its alignment peg. Secure the front antenna with its Torx 15 screw. Replace the antennas to the wireless LAN board. The antenna connectors are labeled 1 and 2 and should be connected to the corresponding 1 and 2 labeled ports on the wireless LAN board. To remove the wireless LAN board, first remove the access panel and the drives cage. Carefully snap off the antenna connectors from the wireless LAN board. Detach the Phillips No. 1 screw, securing the wireless LAN board in place. The board will pop up. Remove the board. The wireless LAN board has a notch offset from the center that aligns over a key in its motherboard socket. To replace the wireless LAN board, angle the board into its motherboard socket at a 30-degree angle and press down. Hold it down while replacing the screw. Replace the antenna connectors to the board. The antenna connectors are labeled 1 and 2 and should be connected to the corresponding 1 and 2 labeled ports on the wireless LAN board. CMOS factory settings should be restored as a first step before replacing the system motherboard. To restore CMOS factory settings, first remove the access panel and the drive's cage. Remove the battery from the motherboard. Wait 30 seconds. Replace the battery to the motherboard. CMOS factory settings are now reset. Note that you will now need to enter System BIOS and reset the clock in BIOS after this procedure. To remove the motherboard, first remove the access panel, the main bezel, and the drive's cage. Remove any expansion cards or riser modules. System memory, and the wireless LAN board. Remove the SD card reader if installed in the unit. If a DisplayPort module is installed, remove the system fan and the DisplayPort module. Remove the heatsink and the CPU. When removing the CPU, install a socket cover on the load plate window before replacing the load plate over the socket. Detach all system connectors to the motherboard. Remove the connector from the solenoid lock if installed in the unit for clearance removing the motherboard. Remove the 8 Torx 15 screws that attach the motherboard to the PC. Slide the motherboard toward the front of the unit, tip the rear of the motherboard up, and remove it carefully from the unit. Place the motherboard in an anti-static bag. There are several clips on the inside of the chassis to help correctly align the motherboard in the chassis. To replace the motherboard, carefully tip the front edge of the motherboard into the unit. Clear connectors away from the edges of the board as you place the motherboard down into the unit, sliding it into its rear port cutouts and within the guide clips on the chassis. Replace the 8 Torx 15 screws to secure the motherboard to the unit. Replace all connectors to the motherboard. Replace the connector to the solenoid lock if a lock is installed in the unit.